past time to start. So we're rapidly approaching the end of this quarter, which is kind of surprising in some ways. It seems like it's been a really long quarter, but it seems weird that it's over. I don't know what that means. I have this week, then next week is our ministry fair. So this whole area is going to be full of, I won't say exhibits, that's the wrong way to say it, but tables with stuff for you to look at and figure out where you want to serve. And then the following week, John is going to teach one last time. And then the final week of March, our men's retreat speaker will be here and we'll have a combined adult class. So it's this time and then one more class with our ordinary people. Next quarter, if I may, I was going to ask you to do this, but it's not put you on the spot. You can if you want to, but John's going to be teaching a class next quarter in here that he taught 4 or 5 years ago on Wednesday night. It's called You'll Get Through This. It's kind of a video series. It's a great series. It's a study of the life of Joseph, more or less. But it's a great study. I think it'll be really applicable, really beneficial for any age group. But I really think you guys will enjoy it. John does a great job with that, and I'm looking forward to it. Just because the material is so good. This morning, like I said, we're going to continue with our final of our ordinary men. We're going to be looking at the life of. Oh, I just had one moving letter. That's pretty lame. And you don't even hear it. Phillip, who is in our author John MacArthur in his book that we've been kind of using. He refers to him as the bean counter. What does that term imply? Accountant. What I mean, even if you're not an accountant, somebody says you're the bean counter type. What is that saying about you?
You're frugal, cost cutter.
Frugal, cost cutter. Nerd. I would think attention to detail, pretty straightforward. I think that's kind of what we see. We don't know a ton about Phillip. But I think in just a little bit that we see and some of the things that we can kind of extrapolate from what we do know, there's some interesting application that we can make to our own lives from his life. Before we get started, I ask John if he would to lead us in a prayer. Any particular prayer requests this morning?
Casey's grandmother's early mid-90s. She's had a lot of natural health problems.
Casey's grandmother? Where's that? Where's she?
She's in Florida.
Florida?
Just in a lot of pain.
Health issues late in life?
We'll be traveling, going to Phoenix this week.
The McCarthys be traveling.
Ashley's coming back from Toronto tomorrow.
Ashley's traveling home tomorrow. McCarthy's leaving. Ashley's coming home. Would ask a prayer. You'll hear this in the service, I'm sure. But prayers for Richard and Lori. They're back from Africa, but they're both under the weather, trying to shake the cold flu thing they have. They have, as Richard told me, we have a bug, not the bug. So they're. And if it sounds like, I don't know exactly where they are as far as the recovery, but it sounds as much as anything like they're doing us a favor by just kind of staying away and letting themselves fully recover. So keep them in your prayers if you would. Anything else? John?
To come and to approach your throne through this avenue of prayer. Before we petition those that have been mentioned this morning, Father, we pray that you be with Casey's grandmother in Florida and the pain that she's experiencing. We just pray that you be with her and give her the comfort that she needs.
Okay. We've talked a few times. We've talked about our men. Our men have all been apostles. And we've talked about the list of the apostles' names. When you look at these various lists throughout the Gospels, you'll find Philip always listed as fifth. Now, when Blake talked about Peter, Peter was listed as the first of the apostles. And what did we kind of conclude about that? You've got to at least know. That he was kind of looked at as the leader. Well, what's interesting in some of the studies and some of the ways that these things are listed, Philip being the fifth, some people suggest that he was kind of the leader of the second group of four. It sounds bad, but the second tier of apostles. He was there was the really good, no, that wasn't it. But we do know that Jesus had that kind of inner circle that were always kind of with him, that were the people that he was had a more intimate relationship, even among the 12. It seems like maybe Philip might be the guy who kind of, I don't know, maybe led that second group. This is interesting. I don't know why I think this is interesting, but his name, Philip, means lover of horses. That's very inconsequential. I just think that's interesting for some reason. But his name is Greek, and he of the apostles is not given we don't have a Jewish name. You know, with Matthew we have Levi. With Peter, he's Cephas. He's actually Cephas first, and then Simon is his Greek-ish name, and then Jesus calls him Peter. But his name is just always listed as Philip. He's from Bethsaida, an area, a lot of the apostles are from kind of the same region. He is a little south of where they are. But here's something interesting to remember. He is not the Philip from Acts chapter 8. So when I say we don't know a whole lot about him, you're going, wait, didn't he chase down the eunuch? Not him. It's a different Philip. We're talking about Philip the apostle, not Philip who was an early evangelist. Look over to John chapter 21. We're going to spend a lot of our time in the book of John, the Gospel of John. What we do with a lot of these guys is we kind of piece them together, piece their stories together. What do we know about Peter, Andrew, James, and John as far as their pre-Jesus life? They were fishermen. There seems to be some indication that Philip may have been one of these, also a fisherman, like that's a type of human. John chapter 21, after Jesus' resurrection, when we're getting to the point where the term we use for some reason is where he reinstates Peter, where he reminds Peter what his job is. But in chapter 21, the first few verses here, it says, after this, Jesus revealed himself again to his disciples by the Sea of Tiberias. He revealed himself in this way. Simon Peter, Thomas, called twin, Nathanael from Cana of Galilee, Zebedee's sons, James and John, and two others of his disciples were together. I'm going fishing, Peter said, we're coming with you. The two others seem to possibly and probably be Philip and Andrew. Philip and Andrew were kind of paired together like James and John were paired together. That if you see one, you kind of end up seeing the other pretty close by. These guys, especially this core that we just see here with Thomas included, probably were a tight-knit group. These guys were probably guys who grew up fishing together, at least in the same region, around the same waters. And that to me is one of those things I think is interesting when we look at the life of Jesus, because we see James and John, they're brothers. Of course, they knew each other. Peter and Andrew, they're brothers. We see that connection. You have to think Jesus probably has known these guys for most of his life. I mean, there's probably a long-term connection with these guys. So when he calls them, it just changes the dynamic in such an interesting way. And we've talked about this, but I want to kind of just throw this out again. We talked about this very early in the quarter. If you were to make up the story of Jesus, if you were just to write a literary piece about the guy who's supposed to be the Savior, who chooses his own apostles, how would you envision the Savior, the Messiah, choosing apostles? If it was like a movie, what would be a cool way to do it?
Knights of the Round Table?
Yeah, maybe by some sort of acts of valor that they had to earn some sort of, you scoured the land looking for the bravest and the most noble and the most whatever wise. What were Jesus' credentials? No, I'm sorry. Not Jesus. Jesus has pretty strong resume. What were Jesus' requirements for his apostles, at least initially? Follow, be available. When Jesus walks up, turn over to John chapter 1. Jesus' main requirement, it seems, and knowing what we know about Jesus, we know that there was something more. I mean, we see over and over, Jesus knows the hearts of men. Jesus knows what people are thinking. He knows what people are like. But it looks like the key thing is availability. Just be somebody who'll go, okay. I mean, you look at when Adam did Matthew a couple weeks ago. Matthew's a tax collector. One of the least possible people you would think that Jesus would choose to be an apostle. And he walks by and goes, follow me. And Matthew seems to be ready to do that. So Jesus knew that. The casual observer would go, a tax collector? Really? So when we look at John chapter 1, somebody read John 1 verse 43, please.
The next day Jesus decided to leave for Galilee. Finding Philip, he said to him, follow me.
So Philip is the first that we have recorded with Jesus making this statement, follow me. We looked last quarter. Was it last quarter we did? Yeah, look through the Gospel of Mark with all these different ways that Jesus said, touch me, hear me, feel me, all these different things. The first person that we have recorded that Jesus says, come and follow me, is Philip. And again, that doesn't really meet doesn't meet my expectations of how I would expect this to happen. Who should Jesus have called first? I mean, seemingly.
People with resources or positions to...
Well, even among the 12, you would think Peter, the one who's listed as what was the word, protos? The main, you'd think, well, I got to get him first. He's going to be the main one. But no, the first person he sees is the guy out by the boat and goes, hey, follow me. So, I guess sub-lesson number 1 is what Jesus looks for as much as anything is you to be available. For you to be ready to say, okay, I'll follow. I'm not the wisest. I'm not the most valiant. I haven't slain my tens of thousands or whatever. Jesus looks for someone who's willing to follow. Nate.
Durability would be a strong characteristic to have, because take Matthew, for example, was used to being hated.
Yeah, exactly. Durability.
That wasn't really a strange thing, and same as the fisherman, that you're used to failure, that you know your success rate is low, but you're not looking to get all the fish, you're looking to get enough.
Yeah, what Nate's saying is that one of the characteristics, one of the qualities that, whether it's Philip, Matthew, any of these guys, one of the qualities they possess, I can think of what I was saying, is durability. Matthew used to being disliked, used to being looked down on. These fishermen used to kind of being just average, ordinary guys, used to not having success. You're a fisherman, some days are going to be good days, some days aren't going to be bad, or some days are going to be bad days. That's exactly what it is to be, Christians, trying to be evangelistic, trying to share your faith. You're going to have good days and bad days. People are going to respond, people aren't. So yeah, there's some of these traits that we see that on the surface, it's never put in the text, but you have to think Jesus was kind of looking for some of this. Jesus knew these guys possessed these characteristics. Okay, look at John chapter 1. Now look over verse 45. My Bible falls apart. 45 through 47. Well, let's start with verse 43. This is kind of the whole narrative. I was going to do Philip and Nathanael together because they also kind of seem to be a pair a little bit here. But let's look at this setting here, beginning verse 43. The next day, Jesus decided to leave for Galilee. He found Philip and told him, "Follow me." Now, Philip was from Bethsaida, the hometown of Andrew and Peter. Philip found Nathanael and told him, "We have found the one Moses wrote about in the law, and so did the prophets, Jesus, the son of Joseph from Nazareth." Now, they're making this great declaration. We found the guy. We know who he is. It's Jesus that lives over there in Nazareth. And I've always kind of wondered right here, what was the atmosphere? Because they seem excited. And then Mr. Coldwater, Nathanael, verse 46 says, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" "Come and see," Philip answered. When Jesus saw Nathanael coming toward him, he said about him, "Here truly is an Israelite in whom there is no deceit." Well, I'm getting into Nathanael's story here now. But so there's that moment where Jesus calls him. But what that kind of tells us about Philip is that he's a seeker at heart. I mean, he's looking for this Messiah. And that, I think, is one of the traits that we have kind of seen through all of these people. Even go back to the woman at the well we talked about last week. Yes, she was a Samaritan. Yes, she was a different group of people than the Jews were comfortable with. She had a different concept even of who God was because of some of the things that the Samaritans had brought into their faith. But she was looking for the Messiah. So what we see with Jesus, with a lot of these interactions with people, a lot of these people that he calls to follow him, he's looking for people who are looking for him. I mean, and that in and of itself is such a huge message to us, that it's important for us to be aware of our, I don't mean this to sound supernaturally or anything, but aware of our calling. When we see things that we have opportunities to do, when we have opportunities to serve or to work with people in whatever way, that's a way that Jesus is looking for us to help. So what we see with Philip is this guy who says, "We've been looking for the Messiah forever, and we finally found him." He was a guy who was already aware and was attentive for the possibility of the Messiah showing up. So I mean that's a key component in his nature, I think. The fact that he is looking for the Messiah to happen or to appear. So there's really three scenes in the life of Philip that we can get some information about who he is and you know how what actually builds his character, what his character is built of. And the one that stands out the most, at least to me, is the feeding of the 5,000. Look over in John chapter 6. Because in this setting, we have what to me is kind of an interesting contrast between Philip and Andrew. But what we see from Philip is more of the, and I guess this is where you kind of get the tag, the bean counter. Because he seems pretty pragmatic. He seems pretty, cut and dried. Here's what we have. Here's what we can do. If someone would please read John chapter 6, verses 3 through 6 out loud, please.
Jesus went out on the mountain, and there he sat with his disciples. Now the Passover of feast of the Jews was near. And Jesus lifted up his eyes, and seeing a great multitude coming toward him, he said to Philip, Where shall we buy bread, that these may eat? But this he said to test him, for he himself knew what he would do.
Okay, when we look at the apostles, late in Jesus' life, we get a statement in Scripture about Judas. What was Judas's job among the apostles? He was the treasurer. He was the one that kept the money and ripped off the apostles and ripped off Jesus. Can you imagine that being known in history? You're the guy that ripped off Jesus. But that's what we see. We see that he was in charge of the money. It seems like here that maybe Philip might be the guy who's in charge of food. And maybe it was that day, maybe it was that month, whatever. But for some reason, Jesus turns to him. Now, I'm just going to open this up. You're Philip. How does that make you feel? You see this crowd, and Jesus asks you this question: where will we buy bread so that these people... Now, this isn't just you people coming to my house. That would be a panic. I mean, with whatever, 30, 25, whatever, that would freak me out. We're talking 5,000 men, so we don't know total number of people. And Philip goes, hey, or Jesus says, hey, Philip, where are you going to get bread for all these people? What's your reaction if you're Philip? Just immediate laughter. Probably nervous laughter. Please tell me you're joking. Please tell me you're joking. What else? Let them get their own food. Anything else?
Clearly overwhelmed.
Overwhelmed.
I see him as, Jesus says in verse 6 that Jesus asked Philip this question to test him. And so, since Jesus kind of knew who he was, Philip, to me at least, is one of those guys who takes on a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
He takes it seriously.
Yeah.
And he just thinks through it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, what we see, I think, from Philip is some of that maybe not cynical, but very serious. That Jesus asked the question, his response is like, there's no way we can do it. We don't have the cash. We don't have near enough money to pay for food for these people. And it almost like he washes his hands of it and goes, well, can't do it.
So when we were talking about fishermen before, I was reminded of Matthew, where they're supposed to pay the temple tax.
Yeah.
And Jesus tells Peter to go fishing and take the 4 coins you find in this fish's mouth and pay our tax. Maybe Philip's doing the same thing here. Well, we're next to a lake. We've got fishermen. Let's just fish the 200 denarii out of the lake and
Yeah.
buy the bread.
Yeah, Adam said you think of the scene with Matthew where in Matthew where Jesus tells the apostles to go fish and take the coins from the fish mouth, and that's how we're going to pay. So maybe Philip's thinking, okay, there's got to be something here. Maybe he's got something else to say. Go ahead.
It was on a different point, but it's an interesting question that Jesus asked as well. I mean, he kind of leads. He says, well, where are we to buy bread? So it's almost like he's like getting them thinking in that.
Yeah, and that's kind of my next question. Then what is Jesus' motive? And maybe it seems like it's just to get him to think. I'll admit that I'll tell you something about myself that is not a great quality. I don't know what it is, but I remember several times, especially like when I was at school at Bear Valley, where I would go and I'd want to talk to, say, Denny Petrillo. At the time, the president of the school. I'd need to go ask him a question about class, and we'd end up kind of having a conversation. And Denny literally has degrees in Hebrew, Greek, and then some other stuff. But we'd start talking about like 1 Timothy. He's literally written a book on 1 and 2 Timothy. And we'd start talking about his class, and he'd ask me, it's interesting that Paul says this way. And my reaction is, I want to say something right. I'm talking to this guy who's really smart. I don't want to go, yeah, he wrote that word a few times. I mean, you don't want to say something stupid. I mean, you want to say something that contributes. I think if I'm putting myself in Philip's place and Jesus says, where are we going to get the money to buy the food for these people? My first thought is, well, how do I answer this guy? I mean, this is our rabbi. This is the Messiah. I've got to give a good answer. And it seems like what Wendell was saying, it seems like this is his good answer. We just can't do it. We don't have the money. There's no way we can do this. And he said, and the text tells us, he said this to test him. What's the test, you think? To test if he believes that Jesus can really do something. So, knowing that, it almost makes me think it would have been great if Philip would have went, I don't know, but I know you can do something about it. And if maybe in hindsight, Philip went, oh man, I should have said that. That would have been a smart thing to say. But he says, there's no way we can do this. We just don't have the money. Now, here's the interesting contrast. What did Andrew do? He did what? He went and found something, and he found a secret storage of hundreds of loaves of bread, tons of, right? No. He finds this lad, however old the kid was, with what looks to be his lunch, maybe his family's meal, 5 loaves and 2 fish, or 2 fish and 5, I can never remember the numbers. And he takes it to Jesus and goes, here, we got this. What do you think Philip's reaction to that would have been? What are you doing? I mean, based on just what we can see with just this, I mean, his immediate answer was, we can't do it. We don't have the money, we can't do it. Andrew shows up with this sack of fish and bread and goes, here, we have this. That's where I guess for me, that's where I kind of get the idea maybe that Philip might have been straightforward to the point of maybe a little cynical. Because he doesn't give any indication there's some way we can get this done. He says, we just can't do it. But we know, of course, we know what happens. Again, that to me would be one of those interesting things to see what happened with Philip during all this. Of course, we don't know. But what we do know is that Philip witnessed Jesus take care of this situation. I mean, what an incredible moment to go from there's no way we can do it, we don't have the money, to wow, we've got baskets of food left over. The faith step that would be for Philip. Okay, so end of that scene. That might not paint Philip in such a great light, but I don't necessarily mean it to be negative as much as it is. He's just a realist. He's like, well, we can't do this. But he witnesses Jesus do something. Now then, scoot up in your text to John chapter 12. John chapter 12, this is another interesting situation.
Hey, Clint, before we leave there,
Yes, sir.
is there anything to be taken about the fact that he says 200 denarii? He doesn't say like a cajillion dollars. I mean, he gives like maybe a realistic number.
Yeah.
Like you talk about the bean counter.
Yeah, exactly. What John says, it may show something about Philip's nature that he threw out a specific number. It wasn't, we'd need $1 billion. I mean, that, again, probably something I'd exaggerate. But he goes, we'd need, and which tells you he probably went, yeah, we need about, I mean, he's realistic. He's saying, here's the number we need to get to, and we just can't get there. Which, like I said, it shows a realist, and it shows, like I said, it shows a guy who is probably kind of a bean counter. Which, again, not a negative, that's just who he is. And Jesus still worked with it. You know, Jesus didn't go, yeah, you're right, forget it.
I think maybe why Jesus asked him before just performing a miracle is to get him to doubt that it's possible a little bit.
Yeah.
The prove him wrong is the wrong way to say it, but basically show him that yes, it is possible.
Yeah, but prove him wrong is kind of the right way to say it too. I mean,
Like a magician, you know, when they perform a trick, they don't just perform a trick. I mean, they make you have a reasonable doubt that no, that's not going to be possible, and then they prove you wrong.
yeah, exactly. What Brad's saying is maybe Jesus' question was, for lack of a better term, kind of a setup to get Philip thinking, yeah, you're okay. You and I are on the same page. We can't do this. What do we do? Let's send him home. I'll get 3 or 4 of the guys. We'll start herding them out of here. And Jesus goes, sit down. I mean, that's the way Jesus works.
The other thing I'm taking away from it is that, Philip, like me sometimes, will focus on what the problem is. Like, well, there's a problem here, we've got to feed all these people, and Jesus asked me how this is going to work out. And well, let's see what we got. No, it's not going to work. And whereas Andrew is somebody who's going to focus on what the possibilities are.
Yeah.
What are some of the solutions you can come up with.
Yeah.
And let me trust in Jesus a little bit to do something with what we've got.
Absolutely. What Jeremy said is you look at Philip, and Philip on this side is the guy who's the realist. Here's the problem. It's unovercomable. It's insurmountable is probably the real word. Andrew, on the other hand, is, okay, yeah, it's a huge problem, but at least we have this. You got your problem, your realist, your problem guy, and the solutions guy. Tells you in a broader picture even a lot about how Jesus selected these guys. I need a guy like this. I need a guy like this.
I have a hard time coming to that conclusion about Andrew, because I feel like Andrew's a realist too. At least he's getting started on the problem.
Yeah.
Found some food. If someone was going to be faithful, what confuses me about this is the lack of mention of manna.
Yeah.
5,000 people. These are Hebrews. The last time we had to feed a large collection of people miraculously, like everyone should know who's a Hebrew what manna is.
Yeah.
No one mentions manna. They don't go to the miraculous as firsthand. They go to, even Andrew goes to the realistic. He goes and finds actual food rather than saying, okay, God, Jesus, give us manna.
Yeah, what Adam's saying is it shows a little bit of a lack of faith on the crowd, maybe the apostles specifically, that there's no mention of manna. I will say, until Jesus brings it up. At the end of this chapter, Jesus goes, you know, your forefathers were fed from manna from heaven. And God took care of that. I just took care of your food yesterday. Where do you think that came from? So Jesus does make the connection. The people showing a lack of faith or lack of understanding, I would almost say, of who Jesus is, never even jumped to that. Even Andrew goes, well, we got to get something. Let's get started with something.
It's interesting how you have a contrast of possibilities and a contrast of an individual who looks at, well, it can't be done.
Yeah.
Because to give reasons why it can't be done. And many times that we allow that to get in our way. We can't do it because of this.
Yeah.
Yet there's a possibility that we can do it, but we got to figure out how to work through it.
Yeah, what Wendell's saying is you see with Andrew the possibility thinking where Philip is, and at least he doesn't go, yeah, we can't do this, just forget it. He at least seems to reason through, it's going to take X amount of dollars, we don't have it, we can't do it. So as we progress through, again, look over John chapter 12. Progress through from this point, John chapter 12, verse 20, says, now some Greeks were among those who went up to worship at the festival. They're in Jerusalem now. So they came to Philip, who was from Bethsaida in Galilee, and requested of him, Sir, we want to see Jesus. Let's just stop right there for a second. Okay, so these Greeks, some Gentiles, some people who are not Jews, have come to the festival, which it seems to indicate maybe they're proselytes, or I don't know if they're just interested or what the deal is. But their request, I mean, as a preacher, you just jump all over statements like this. We wish to see Jesus. I mean, you could make a sermon series for a year on this. But their statement is, we want to see this guy. Now, again, you think of this hierarchy, if you will, of the apostles. Of course, these Greek guys aren't going to know this. But why do you think they go to Philip? Greek name. He must have some connection. I don't know if there's a look about him that he goes, oh, maybe he's one of us. Or they just hear that he's called Philip and the other guys have a Jewish name. But for some reason, they go to him. Now, this, to me, this is one of those scenes that has always fascinated me, and I don't really even know why. But what is Philip's response in verse 21? What is it?
He escalates up the chain.
He escalates. He passes it along. To whom? Why Andrew? I mean, like I said, to me that's always fascinated me. It's almost like it just fits in the narrative with Andrew. Which, I mean, it does, because that's who Andrew is, I think. But why do you think he goes to Andrew instead of just going, okay, we asked to see Jesus, not this guy?
An idea guy. I mean, like if you just like face the embarrassment that Philip did feeding 5,000, like Andrew was the one that came and had the idea, right?
Yeah, you're a smart guy. These guys. Well, yeah, I mean, maybe it is that Andrew is, and you know, at the festival, there's a crowd of people. Maybe Jesus is in a crowd of people, busy, or maybe he goes, hey, Andrew, I need some help. We got to get these people to Jesus. What's Andrew's history? What do you know about Andrew from early on? Doesn't he have a history of bringing people to Jesus? He goes and gets his brother. He's involved with going to get Nathaniel. He's involved with bringing people into Jesus' presence. So maybe that has become Andrew's role. You're in charge of public affairs or whatever. If Judas is money, Philip's food, maybe Andrew's the make the connection guy. But for some reason, Philip knows if I want to get people to Jesus, it might not be me. Maybe that's part of that tier of apostles. Maybe he feels like I need Andrew to go with me to give it some credibility. But he goes and gets Andrew. Now, again, even in this, just a quick sub-lesson here, we have to assume Philip could have made the approach to Jesus. But for some reason, even with people who shared his background, he wasn't comfortable, it wasn't possible for whatever reason, but he got somebody else and said, hey, let's get these people to Jesus. And there's an obvious lesson for us. It may not be me. It may not be you. Somebody comes to you and says this, I want to know who Jesus is. That doesn't always mean you have to be the one to do it. You can go get somebody else to go, okay, here, let me introduce you to this person, and together we can figure this out. If the apostles, the people who lived and worked and breathed and ate right next to Jesus, can get some help from somebody else, then we can. And that's what this is for. That's what this young adult, young family idea is for. That's what the church as a whole is for. The people you go to when somebody says, I want to see Jesus, and you go, okay, hang on. Let me grab somebody who can help me help you. And that's what Philip does. And then finally, the final scene is in the upper room. Look at John chapter 14. I have to just read a couple of verses here. Toward the end of Jesus' life, literally the night before, this is a tough moment for me for some reason. Verse 5, Thomas said, we don't know where you're going. How can we know the way? Jesus said to him, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. If you know me, you will also know my Father. From now on, you do know him and have seen him. Lord, said Philip, show us the Father, and that's enough for us. What do you think about that statement when Philip says that? What's your first response? Your first reaction? It's almost John's a face palm. What? What were you thinking?
The last person to see the Father was Moses, and it was his backside.
Yeah.
It was him walking away, and he was in this crevice. And here Philip says, we want to see what Moses saw. We don't care about you.
That's all. And that'll be enough. Just show us God, and that'll be enough. So to me, this is always kind of a cringy moment. That this is, like John said, kind of a facepalm moment for Jesus. That's like, really? This is where... But I think if you look at the context of what Jesus has been saying, if you know me, you know the Father. That you've seen me, you've seen the Father. So he's making this connection between he and God. And then, verse 9, Jesus said to him, have I been among you all this time and you do not know me? Philip, the one who has seen me has seen the Father. How can you say, show us the Father? So this, to me, is a little bit of a bad scene for Philip. But I think what we can take from this, just as we wrap up real quick here, Philip shows some obvious flaws. I'm not saying his attention to detail, the bean counterness, I'm not saying that's a flaw. Really, I'm not even sure if we can say this, show us the Father. To me, it's almost like he gets overzealous. He gets a little bit anxious, a little greedy in the moment, and Jesus has to go, relax. Do you not, hello? What have we been doing here? But I think what we see from Philip, as we've seen from a lot of these people, really a lot of these apostles, is we see God working through these people, Jesus working with these guys. We see God's strength in our weakness, through our weaknesses, in spite of our weaknesses. Philip was a guy who, obviously, literally lived, walked with Jesus, but had those moments where he says things like, show us the Father. Has those moments where he says, there's no way we can do this. Has those moments where he could take people to Jesus, but instead gets some help. We all have those moments. We have those moments where we're weak. We have those moments where we don't know what to do in the situation. We have moments where we doubt. Yet never do we see, just like we see with Peter, with Matthew, with all these different apostles we've looked at, never does Jesus go, okay, get out. You are worthless, except one. He does that with one, and even then he says, what you do, do quickly. He doesn't say don't do it. He says, just go do it. But for us, as ordinary people, as regular Christians trying to do the best we can, I think these people, and these men, these women, in so many ways, can serve as an inspiration to us, because we don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be the guy that has all the answers in the moment when Jesus says, hey, how are we going to feed these people? You don't have to have the right theological answer. Sometimes you go, I have no idea. You don't have to have the right answer when somebody says, show me Jesus. Sometimes you go, let me get somebody who can do that. So I hope as you've looked through these people, like I said, with one more to come, that you've seen some reflections maybe of your own personality that you see that you can work with. Because what we have seen is that God can work with them, no matter what. Any thoughts? Okay, so not next week, but the following week.